There's a moment before you speak when everything about you is already being read. The way you breathe, the way you stand, the stillness or restlessness in your eyes. People sense it before a single word leaves your mouth. They feel whether you are grounded or fragile, confident or desperate to be seen. That instant, that silent prelude, reveals more about who you are than your entire speech ever will. I didn't understand this for years. I thought power lived in words, in how sharp, persuasive, or eloquent they were. But I was wrong. Power begins long before language. It begins in presence. I remember the first time I felt this truth hit me. I was speaking in a meeting, trying to impress people who already half ignored me. I had prepared every word, rehearsed every sentence. But the more I talked, the less they cared. And then it happened. Someone else spoke, calmly, slowly, with almost no expression. The room shifted. Every voice quieted. Everyone listened. Not because he said anything brilliant, but because his presence carried weight. That day, I learned that words are surface waves. Presence is the current beneath. Since then, I've realized most of us speak to compensate, for doubt, for fear, for the discomfort of silence. We talk too much because we're afraid of being unseen. We over-explain because we crave validation. But in that noise, we lose something sacred, the respect that comes from restraint. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "Let your words be plain and direct." A noble soul needs no ornament. He wasn't teaching speech. He was teaching discipline. The discipline to speak only when your mind is steady enough for your words to mean something. When I first tried to practice this, it felt strange. I would pause before speaking, hold my silence longer than comfort allowed, and observe the space between words. At first, people found it unsettling. Then they started leaning in. They stopped interrupting. I wasn't louder, I was calmer. And that calmness spoke louder than I ever could. I began to understand that self-mastery isn't visible through achievements or titles. It's visible in how you carry yourself in the smallest moments, in a glance, a breath, a pause. The Stoics believed your words reveal the architecture of your mind. A scattered tongue belongs to a scattered soul. But when your speech is slow, deliberate, and uncluttered, people sense something different. They sense trust. They feel order. You don't need to declare your confidence. They feel it before you speak. If this resonates with you, if you've ever felt that your words were heard but your presence wasn't felt, subscribe to the channel. Support this work so I can continue creating reflections that help you reclaim your calm, your confidence, and your voice. Now a question for you, one that reveals more than it seems. Which do you believe holds more power? A, the one who speaks the most. B, the one who doesn't need to speak to be understood. Type your answer A or B in the comments. I'll see you there. It took me years to understand that most people don't actually listen to what you say. They listen to how you are. Words are fragile things. They can be clever, persuasive, even poetic, but if they don't rise from a place of calm conviction, people feel the emptiness behind them. I used to think that the louder or more passionate I became, the more convincing I'd sound. But the truth is, passion without discipline sounds like noise. Confidence without stillness feels like desperation. And when you speak from desperation, people sense it instantly, even if they can't explain why. One afternoon, I was having coffee with an old mentor. He was a quiet man, the kind whose silence made you nervous at first. Every time I spoke, he would simply nod, never interrupting, never filling the space. I talked more than I should have, explaining ideas he hadn't asked for, just to break the weight of his silence. Finally, after a long pause, he said, "You're afraid of silence because you mistake it for absence. But silence isn't emptiness. It's space for truth to emerge." That sentence hit me harder than any lecture ever could. After that day, I started to notice the moments when I was speaking to fill silence rather than to add meaning. I caught myself explaining things twice because I wanted approval, softening my opinion so others would agree, talking quickly to avoid seeming unsure. But the more I tried to control how others saw me, the more invisible I became. People don't respect noise, they respect clarity. They don't follow those who rush, they follow those who remain still in uncertainty. The Stoics called this discipline of expression speaking only when your words align with your reason. Seneca wrote that the greatest freedom is to need nothing. I think that includes the need to be understood. The moment you stop needing to prove your point, your words start carrying power. Because now, you're not talking to win, you're talking to share. You're no longer reacting to the noise of the world. You're revealing the calm you've built within. That kind of presence can't be faked. It's not about how you sound, it's about what your stillness says before you speak. I began practicing this deliberately. Before every conversation, I took one deep breath and reminded myself, you don't need to convince anyone. You only need to be clear. The result was profound. People began to listen longer, interrupt less, and remember more. The less I tried to be impressive, the more respect I earned. And I realized something almost paradoxical. The quieter you become, the more your words echo. That's the essence of Stoic communication, not speaking to dominate, but to resonate. Not using words to prove your worth, but to express the strength of your inner order. The fewer words you use, the more weight they carry, because they're rooted in thought, not impulse. When your speech reflects peace instead of need, people listen not because they have to, but because they want to. There was a time when I thought that silence made me look weak. That if I didn't speak up, someone else would take control of the room. So I filled every quiet moment with words, opinions, explanations, reassurances. I was desperate to sound certain even when I wasn't. But the more I tried to prove my confidence, the more I revealed my fear. It took me years to understand that silence doesn't expose weakness, it exposes truth. And only those who have faced their inner chaos can remain silent without crumbling beneath it. I learned this the hard way during a confrontation that changed how I communicate forever. A colleague accused me of something I didn't do, a decision that cost the team a deal. My first instinct was to defend myself, to justify every step, to fight back with evidence and anger. But then I remembered what my mentor once told me: never explain when you're calm. Never react when you're provoked. Stillness unsettles more than rage ever could. So I said nothing. I just looked at him, steady, unblinking, and waited. The silence stretched. He began to falter, to fill the air with excuses, to justify himself instead. By the end, everyone in that room saw what I didn't have to say. My composure spoke louder than any defense could. That moment taught me the true power of restraint. When you master your reactions, you don't just control yourself, you control the tone of every interaction. People confuse speaking first with strength. But real power lies in being the one who decides when and whether to speak at all. The Stoics called this asterisk temper, ANTI, asterisk measured expression. The discipline to pause before every word, to ensure that what you say builds, not burns. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events." I used to interpret that as control over thoughts and emotions. But now I see it also means control over your expression. Your words are the visible tip of your inner discipline. The more peace you cultivate inside, the less you feel the need to explain yourself to anyone. That's the paradox. When you no longer need to prove your integrity, people start believing in it naturally. I began practicing this not just in conflict, but in everyday life. When people misunderstood me, I stopped rushing to correct them. When they underestimated me, I let them. When they spoke louder, I stayed grounded. And something unexpected happened. The less I tried to control how others saw me, the more respect I gained. People started coming to me for clarity, not noise. Because silence, when it's rooted in truth, commands trust. That's when I finally understood what it means to speak like a Stoic. It's not about sounding wise. It's about embodying wisdom before you open your mouth. The goal isn't to win arguments, it's to win peace. And when your peace is stronger than anyone's opinion, your silence becomes your loudest statement. There's a strange thing that happens when you finally stop explaining yourself. You start to see how much noise runs the world. Everywhere you look, people are performing, not communicating. They speak to fill the silence, to be seen, to win approval they don't even respect. But once you step back and observe, it feels almost surreal, like watching a storm from behind glass. You see how restless people are, how afraid they are to be unseen, unheard, unacknowledged. And in that moment, you understand something profound. Most people don't speak from truth, they speak from fear. I remember sitting in a crowded office one afternoon, watching a heated discussion unfold. Everyone was talking over each other, voices rising, hands gesturing, egos clashing. I stayed silent, not out of strategy but out of fatigue. The chaos didn't pull me in anymore. I just watched. Slowly, the noise started to fade, not because they stopped talking, but because I stopped needing to be part of it. I realized how often I had once been one of them, mistaking loudness for leadership, mistaking certainty for wisdom. That day, I saw the cost of noise. It wasn't just distraction, it was erosion. Every unnecessary word eats away at your peace. Later that night, I wrote in my journal, "If your words don't serve truth, they serve your insecurity." It hit me harder than I expected, because I saw how many of my own sentences were rooted in fear, fear of being wrong, fear of being ignored, fear of being judged. The Stoics were right. You don't find peace by controlling the world. You find it by mastering your inner dialogue. When your words no longer come from reaction, but from reason, you become untouchable. Epictetus once said, "No man is free who is not master of himself." That mastery isn't visible in what you achieve, it's revealed in what you resist. The urge to interrupt, the impulse to defend, the temptation to correct someone who misunderstands you. Every time you resist, you strengthen something far greater than pride, you strengthen presence. The kind of presence that commands attention not through volume, but through gravity. Over time, I learned that communication is not a battlefield to win, it's a mirror. Every conversation reflects the state of your mind. When you're calm, your words bring peace. When you're chaotic, your words spread it. The more I practiced this awareness, the more I saw a shift in how people treated me. They spoke slower, listened longer, trusted quicker. And it wasn't because I said anything special. It was because I had stopped trying to prove anything at all. That's the quiet paradox of power. You gain it the moment you no longer chase it. When you stop fighting to be heard, your silence becomes magnetic. When you stop explaining, your truth starts to echo. Because presence doesn't shout, it resonates. And when it does, people feel it long after you've stopped speaking. People started revealing themselves to me in ways they never had before. When I stopped filling every space with words, they began to fill the silence with truth, confessions, doubts, stories they had never told anyone. It was as if my stillness gave them permission to stop pretending too. That's when I realized silence is not absence. It's presence in its purest form. It's the space where truth breathes, where respect grows, where connection finally becomes real. But silence isn't easy to hold. It demands strength, not weakness. It requires you to stand in the discomfort of uncertainty without reaching for control. I failed at this countless times. I'd stay calm for a while, then something small, a careless comment, a dismissive glance would set off the old impulse to defend myself. And each time I gave in, I felt my power slip away. I was reminded of something Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The best revenge is to be unlike your enemy." That line isn't about forgiveness, it's about mastery. To remain unmoved in the face of chaos is not indifference. It's evolution. One evening, I was in a meeting where tension was running high. A colleague raised his voice, accused me of holding up the project, and waited for me to retaliate. For a brief second, I felt the fire rise in my chest, the urge to fight, to prove, to win. But then, something inside me shifted. I took a slow breath, met his eyes, and said nothing. The silence was almost unbearable. But then it broke not with my words, but with his. His voice softened, his body language changed. The energy in the room deflated. In that stillness, I realized I had said more by not reacting than I ever could with 1,000 arguments. The Stoics called this the art of inner citadel, the ability to remain unshaken within yourself no matter how the world storms outside. That's what presence truly means. It's not about controlling the room. It's about mastering the space within you so fully that the room begins to adjust to you. When your peace becomes louder than their chaos, you've already won. Every day since, I've tried to live by one rule. Let my presence speak first, my silence speak second, and my words last. Because the deeper truth is this: people don't remember what you said. They remember how they felt in your presence. And if your presence carries calm, clarity, and conviction, that's what they'll take with them long after you've left. So now I'll leave you with a challenge. Tomorrow, walk into a room and say less than you normally would. Slow your movements. Hold your silence. Let the weight of your presence speak before your mouth does. Watch what changes not in them, but in you. Because every word you don't say in fear becomes a word of strength inside your soul. If this message resonated with you, if you want to keep building that kind of quiet strength, subscribe. Let's grow together, one stoic breath, one calm moment at a time. The world doesn't need louder voices. It needs steadier souls. Be one of them.